Brian. Welcome to the show.
Great to be back with you, man.
Hey, dude. I really love your channel, your content. It's been fun watching you evolve. Been fun watching you troll with your Trump support. I just wanted to, pre-election, I
I
wanted
appreciate that. I wanted to ask you, like, what do you think, man? Have I gone too far? Because I've turned into a troll.
a little bit, but the platform honestly sort of encourages that type of behavior. So whatever, you
Right.
get your engagement, get your followers up. I
Right
think you
on.
have substantive content, right? We're all in that situation where
Right.
we all have something to say. We're all trying to get heard. And you got to have some subscribers and some people, some eyeballs to get your message out to. So, uh, whatever, do what you have to do. But I've always been interested, man. Like I've been watching your podcast. Obviously, I've appeared on it. You've talked to tons of people, really smart people, a lot of really well informed people, a lot of diverse backgrounds, and different guests. And so, have you arrived at your political identity? I know you've been searching for it, man. Like, have you got there?
I don't think so. I've reached this big milestone. So it's been a 3.5 year journey searching for the political identity. But a subset of that, of course, was also searching for the next election, who I'm going to choose. So I've reached that election choice, but not yet. And I'm still struggling, like abortion, for example.
Mhm.
You know, I take the reasonable position. I'm not ready to take the extreme. I will use the word extreme, respectfully use that word extreme, because maybe I'll embrace it. It's tough, but no. And immigration is another issue where it's like, okay, that's not really a reason that I'm supporting Trump, but for all the reasons that I am, I go, maybe he's right about that too, even though it sounds cruel at times. So still a lot of conflicts, still a lot of things to understand. I mean, there's so many issues, like details. I mean, I'm not a Pulitzer Prize winning anything, so still so much learning to do. So no, sir.
Cool. So you referenced a couple of issues. Want to give me your background on them because I actually, honestly don't know. Like, where do you stand on like abortion and immigration?
Well, when I studied, so right before I studied critical race theory in my final year of law school, which launched this whole effort, I forget what class it was in, but we studied the abortion issue. And I can tell you,
Mhm.
reading Roe versus Wade, and then the big case after that, which is Casey versus Planned Parenthood, I found myself in agreement. So at the time, whereas I took the critical race theory stuff and said, no, this isn't sitting well with me, I studied Roe and I studied Casey, and it did sit well with me. And so that's probably all I can say. Now,
So real quick. Sorry, I'm a nerd, man. And when you say
yeah,
Roe sat well with you, what does that mean exactly? Because
yeah,
Roe, as I read it, and you've taken more law school than I have, but I've always thought Roe was bad case law. Like my view was this is not something that is enumerated in the powers
yeah,
vested to the federal government, right? This should be a state issue. For example, the same way that murder is adjudicated at the state level. It's not a federal
yeah,
issue, right?
yeah,
And I'm very curious to hear like your opinion on Roe and how you arrive at that, like kind of your mental model
yeah,
around it.
sure. Well, so I wasn't prepared to do a deep dive, but I can give you general response. I remember when thinking about this, when we were learning about it, this idea that there is a bit of fiction involved in arriving at the logic used to justify the case. There's something called the substantive due process clause, which, and I'm not really prepared, to speak in detail about it, but the analogy I used in my head when learning about it was, okay, this is like a magic door that these judges can. It's like the room of requirements in Harry Potter. You know how it always
Mhm. Yeah,
appeared
yeah.
when you needed it, and so it's a vehicle. It's a legal way for judges to read into the Constitution what they think should be there, and so it's a bit of judicial activism, no doubt. Um, and I had been leaning towards originalism, towards a more conservative way of doing. Judicial way of liking how judges work. Nonetheless, as I studied it, I said, you know what, I'm balanced. I like this principle of autonomy and liberty and privacy. And, um, you know, it didn't cause me to lose sleep at night studying it. So that's about as much as I can say about that at the time. Now, with that said, I haven't even read, because I was studying for the bar exam, I haven't even read the Dobbs case. So I'm sure that Alito makes a powerful argument and I would have to read it and tell you, but it's been returned to the states. It's very controversial, and here we are.
Mhm.
It's like a huge issue, and all I can say is that, you know, yeah, I would like abortion to be safe, legal, and rare, right? Like, that's preferably not needed at all. And furthermore, I understand, talking to so many people from the right through doing my podcast over the years, that the idea that our culture has become too lax. And so I understand that it's possible we might need a cultural shift, but um, I don't think I'm prepared to be advocating for super conservative abortion positions, despite being uncomfortable with abortion.
Yeah, and that's totally sensible. And just for everyone's awareness, in case anyone cares, I think Roe is both bad case law and I'm pro-choice, meaning I don't believe the government has any right to insert themselves into private reproductive decisions between women and their healthcare providers. Like that's my general stance. And so, in case it needs to be said, that's where I'm at. But I'm also of the opinion, like probably most reasonable people, that it should be, minimized if at all possible. Like this is not something folks should be. This is a moral proclamation that we should not be using this as a form of birth control. This is not something that people should be celebrating, right? Like people should not be,
Sure. Yeah.
treating it flippantly, because I do believe that it has some pretty devastating consequences, and I think that some people do, and oftentimes because they get sideways of each other, because there's somebody on the right that's really pushing them, so they're going to be like, "Fuck you! I'm going to push even harder and get more extreme," and we get polarized and say a bunch of really nasty stuff that sort of trivializes the impact. And so I don't like that about it, but ultimately, like I said, I'm a pro freedom person generally.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, maybe what should happen is that a law should be passed, and something codifying Roe. Maybe that's where we stand. Something
It'll
like that.
probably go there. I think that there's been such a history in this country of having it legal everywhere by virtue of the Roe decision that it's kind of embedded in the fabric of the U.S. And what you're seeing now,
Right.
states like I live in Tennessee, and so I'm in a more conservative state now. I used to be in Washington, and I think a lot of people are worried about reproductive rights, and I think they will vote for something like that. You said each state may end up just sort
Yeah.
of codifying into law, and whatever. Like I'm not sure how this is going to play out, but I do know that there are a lot of concerned people that are from that camp where it used to be blanket protected everywhere. Now it's kind of seems like it's a open season a little bit, and there's states that are starting to tweak things and experiment. And I hear a lot of, I'm a dad of three daughters, man. I hear a lot of talk about people being very disgruntled about this and very worried about what the implications of that might be.
Yeah. No, it is funny now that you mention it. The abortion issue was kind of the outlier for me in my law school experience because like I said, I was trending towards liking the conservative argument that the judges really shouldn't make law. That's not their job.
Mm-hmm.
But here I was not having a problem with those decisions. So perhaps I didn't give it enough scrutiny, but that was my initial reaction at the time.
Cool, cool. So let's go on to something less controversial. Let's talk about immigration, man. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
what do you think?
honestly, another issue, so many issues. And so one of my confessions is that I'm so surface level. I mean, I react to what I see in the news and I have formed opinions based on that. And immigration is not one of the primary things I've focused on for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did say, after I've gained most of my followers since coming out with the Trump support, at one time I said, hey, I said something kind of like wishy washy, like, oh, why, maybe we shouldn't be talking about deporting people who have come here illegally. Perhaps that's not appropriate. And I got hit with a lot of comments saying, no, man, the classic argument of if the first thing you do when you get to this country is break the law, then okay, well, maybe is deportation the appropriate remedy? Okay, maybe I have to reconsider that just on itself. And secondly, if the perspective of it being about workers and wages rather than anything else, those two arguments together made me say, you know what? Maybe this Trump guy who I've come around to support and think is right about 8 out of 10 things, maybe he's right about that too. So it's not my rah-rah issue. I'm more of a critical race theory. He's fighting that. That's my big thing. The war, the economy, which I'm not smart on. Louis C.K. made a really cogent argument just a few minutes ago. And so I'm not saying that you can't make a good argument that, the economy would have done the same thing under Trump. But the fact is, a simpleton like myself, judging on results, can make a lot of points about how things were better under Trump. And with all the crap that he's had to endure, not to say that I give him a pass on his election challenge. Not that I'm a genius on that issue either. I think it was wrong. I operate on the surface level. I'm not a cult member. I wasn't comfortable with that. But in light of everything, I say, you know what? This guy's okay, and so I'm gonna give him a chance.
Cool. And I don't denigrate anyone's, political leanings. I'm curious about people, how they arrive at their conclusions. And that's really what I'm primarily focused on. And by the way, you call yourself like a simpleton or surface, but you're not, dude. I've watched your podcast plenty. You talk at great length, breadth, and depth with a lot of thought leaders, and you hold your own. You know that the stuff. Thanks, more man. Than you're letting on, dude. Like, so don't say
well,
that
you
about
know
yourself.
What? Thank you. I appreciate that. Concepts, yes, but so many details. That's why I would never say that I've arrived at a political identity because, okay, I've identified where I keep referring to law school. At law school orientation, first year, they said, okay, in your first year, you're going to learn where the furniture is, right? So I've established where the furniture is in this environment and how I like it decorated. I'm learning that, but I've got to fill in the facts and fill in the details before I can really.
Yeah, fair enough. And that's really a smart, that's an indication of intelligence in my view. Like there's an old adage that the people that are really dumb are so sure that they've got everything right. And people who are typically very smart realize they're very unsure of themselves and they're very tenuous with their positions that they hold and they're malleable and they're open to change. Yeah. So I think that's a good sign, man. So I just like anyone who's listening is not familiar with Brian's work. Go listen to his podcast. He's talked to tons of people about tons of issues at extraordinary length and depth. So I certainly consider you well informed. I do want to talk about some stuff though. The immigration thing is interesting to me. Because I think a lot of people don't know the details of what goes into it. They particularly the conservative who is very, banging the table anti-immigrant, particularly. And what it really means is like Mexican immigrant most of the time. That's really what the focus is, or at least from, Central South America. What they don't know is that the way America's immigration system works, that it's broken. They say, well, you need to come in legally. You need to come in through the front door the proper way. But they don't realize that the United States grants the same number of immigration slots to every country on the planet equally. It's not weighted by, who's coming here. And so if you look at what it would take for somebody to come here legally from Mexico that doesn't have a sponsor, meaning there's not already a person in the country, a family member who's working who can sponsor them, you're talking longer than they're going to be alive on average. It's going to be like 70, 80 years they're waiting in line to get it. Like no one's going to do that. And so I'm sympathetic towards the plight of these people because it's like, what do you like, Brian? Come on, you're on the other side of the border and you're having a really, really tough time. Are you really going to?
All you got to do is go.
All you got to do is go and you're gonna have a better life. Right. And so I'm sympathetic to that. And also being, an anarchist, I'm like, state borders aren't valid. This is just an arbitrary line in the sand. It's not around private property. Like human beings have the right to just travel across the face of the earth and go where there's jobs for them that, where there's a willing employer. Like in my view, like that's sort of table stakes. So,
and the MAGA perspective is, look, it's not that we don't want to be sympathetic to you, but it's just we can't afford to. We're not going to be. We need to look at this through the eyes of the American worker. And that very system, as sad of a situation as it is hurting our country. It's not what drew me to vote for Trump. But like I said, I'm not prepared to. I know the libertarian, maybe anarchist argument is that immigration is good. So the economics of it, I mean, what would the economists say?
Oh, it's very simple. Is that Trump is basically enacting leftist trade policy with respect to labor, right? Because labor is just an economic thing, right? There's a price associated with the market of available jobs versus the available labor, right? Like this is a pricing question, and what they're doing is think of it like tariffs, but for labor. Right, like you're saying, like we're trying to protect the wages of America. We're trying to artificially, essentially, prop up a rate above what the free market, if you didn't have all of these, restrictions in place, would provide. So the wages would actually be lower, and it's an anti-competitive position, right? And this is really the issue I have with Trump in a lot of ways is that with the tariffs, for example, people say, oh, he's going to he's going to make China pay for all this. And it's like, no, they don't. Americans pay tariffs, right? Like these are,
Right.
you're taxing citizens. All you're saying is that it's like a minimum wage argument, right? It's like, it's not like you're making sure everyone has this living wage or whatever. All you're doing is making it illegal to pay somebody less than some arbitrary wage. So you're cutting off the bottom rungs of the job ladder. Right. You're doing the same thing with trade too, just making things more expensive on purpose, because America, because of hyper regulation and all this stuff, like we just can't compete in the market. And so we're like, fuck you, we're going to make a bunch of laws to keep out competition. It's just anti-competitive generally.
Yeah, it is interesting to see how Trump balances the libertarian part of his movement with his protectionist instincts. Where do you think that's going in the future with Vivek?
It's going nowhere. It's going nowhere. So this is my analysis, and then what I'm putting this online. You can check me later, but I see a lot of libertarians getting excited, rallying around Trump. I think Angela McArdle had a picture tweeted out that she sat at a dinner table with Trump. Look, we got a seat at the table. You know what? You're being used. My view is that they're being used because he needs and he's smart. He is a wicked smart campaigner. He's making promises to everybody. He's promised to free Ross. Like this isn't happening.
He got paid by taking Kennedy in. That's what it was.
Yeah. And once we get across the line, I mean, think about this. He's a lame duck president too. When he got elected his first term, like he didn't govern as a conservative. He governed as an authoritarian leftist. Ultimately,
Right.
if you look not look at window dressing and rhetoric, but if you looked at the way he actually governed, it was an authoritarian left governance. And then he was trying to get reelected, and so he had to court conservatives and try to roll back, like, well, hey, why'd you do that stuff with? Oh, I lost Brian. Yeah, so I was saying, like, the libertarians, the RFK types. No, actually, I think I was past that already. I was talking about his reelection bid, and then having to sort of go back and play apologetics for how he governed. And like, hey, why did you give Fauci the Medal of Commendation? Why did you prop up Big Pharma? Why did you execute COVID tyranny, right? And that was, he sort of, danced around that. And now he's in a situation where he'd be essentially a lame duck. He's got no other term in front of him. Like this is his last term if he gets elected. He's beholden to nobody. So I think he's in a panic for his life. He's been convicted of all these felonies and stuff. And, I'm not saying anything about the fairness of that whole process, but it's a fact that he's in serious trouble. And if he can't pardon himself, he's got some rough times ahead of him. So I take nothing that he says right now on face value. I think that he's going to, as soon as he gets the inauguration, it's going to be like, hey, libertarians and RFK, Maha types, like, bye. Like, I'm going to, do what I want to do, and you can go fuck yourself. That's just my view. Maybe he's changed. Maybe he has this, profound change of heart after almost dying. Like, I don't know. I'm not saying that I know this for sure, but it's my suspicion based on watching him for a lot of years. I think that's likely to happen.
I hate to say it, but I've been called gullible before by close friends. And, the assassination attempts played more of a role than they probably should have. Not really, but they played a role. I mean, I have just really said, wow, with him endorsing Kennedy. Marianne Williamson had a great comment shortly after the Kennedy endorsement and said, my good friend Bobby, I think you're being used. She called it as well. So have I been conned by Don the Con? After all this time, after seeing through so many of the biases that I think were real against him, we shall see. But so you think an unshackled Donald Trump, and he would be unshackled in so many ways. It is kind of crazy. I mean, this is a crazy, you think he would do damage?
Well, I don't know if he'll do damage. All I'm saying is there's a lot of people that I see in a lot of different camps. This is one of the benefits I have of being apolitical. I just sort of get observe and watch all the dynamics. And I'm seeing all the promises being made and people getting very excited. Oh, Don, when he gets in, he's going to do like the Doge thing with Elon. That's not going to fucking happen. He's not cutting $2 trillion from the budget. Grow up. Like this isn't happening. And so I see all of this excitement. I don't want to be the wet blanket on everybody's party. Right. It's just, I'm just an old guy. I'll be 50 next year, man. I've seen this shit over and over and over again. And it's like the Charlie Brown thing with the football. You remember, is that resonate with your generation? Or
no,
yeah, so
not at all.
So there's an old cartoon growing up, Charlie Brown, and Lucy would always tell Charlie Brown that he could kick the football. And so she would hold the football for him, and he'd get all excited, and he'd back up, and he'd run into it. And as soon as he'd get close, she'd whip the football away, and he'd fall on his ass, and it happened. Right. It happened like all the time, but he kept doing it. And I'm just like, man, I've seen this movie before. I
Right.
think he's there to get revenge. I think he wants to get the power back. He wants to pardon himself and then just start, attacking people that have been attacking him. And, that's
Right.
natural human
Yeah.
instinct. I get it, but just
Sure.
knowing what I know about his ego, knowing what I know about how he acts when he's wrong, like even slighted. The guy's got a fairly thin skin in a lot of ways, and to be fair to him, to be fair to the man, like they've gone after him every which way, and so
Right. Both
uh,
are true.
both can be true at the same.
There's a deep irony to the whole thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 100%. And so I'm curious to see how it's going to play out, but also I do hold out the option that, maybe he changed. Brushes with death do change people.
Right.
I actually watched the 3-hour episode with Rogan, and although he did do his same weaving and, similar, rhetorical maneuvers and flourishes, I still noticed something different. I'm not sure if you watched that or if you noticed, but he
I didn't finish. No, I only watched the first 10 minutes so far.
he seemed very different. He seemed more human, I guess, than he had previously. So I don't know. I don't know if
Yeah.
anything has changed. Not like I want anything bad to happen for the country. It's just I don't hold the optimism that a lot of other people around me hold. And I guess time will tell. Just see who
You
is
think
right.
he's going to win?
I do. I'm holding out the chances that anything could happen. It's very difficult to tell because there's a couple of things like the polling. I think historically we know polling is bullshit. Like it's not a reliable indicator. And then the poly markets typically are. But then I'm hearing stories that there is some manipulation going on. And I do know that there's large flows of money into the poly market thing, could be potentially manipulated as a mechanism to sort of increase, the belief that Trump is going to win. So I don't know what's true, but it feels, and this is, there's no data behind this really, other than me just paying attention to the news and paying attention to X and watching things going on. It feels like he's going to win because Kamala is just such a bad candidate. Like just, I mean, just vacuous, empty-headed. There's no there, right? It's just,
Right.
it's not. There's no human being. There's no relatability, and I think that this is a reactionary. He's not Trump, and so when you see people cheering for her, you see the hollowness in it. I don't ever encounter anybody in the real world that I talk to who's like, oh man, I really love Kamala. Her policies are amazing. I've always loved her. It's always like
It worked in 2020 under a pandemic election. It is a very different time.
it is, and
I don't think it's going to work again.
I don't think so either. I think, and also I think the earth has shifted a lot. You've seen a lot of people who are Democratic. You got the Tulsi Gabbards of the world, sort of migrating over. RFK, he jumped on board, and there's sort of this coalition. And these people, not to make light of American, the average American, but there is some sort of stardom, this sort of like popularity type of thing that actually pulls voters. They see that this coalition that's not necessarily all Republican people. This is kind of a group, and everyone's saying the same thing. Whether it's Elon, whether it's Tulsi, I think you had Eric Weinstein, came out today and saying he's not voting and talking about stuff, but he's kind of calling out some of the problems that the same coalition is talking about. His Heather Hine. Brett Weinstein's wife, came out. She's supporting Trump. There's people that never in a million years would have thought would have supported Trump are doing it. And I think people are seeing that there's a signal here somehow that all these people are seeing the problem the same way. And while they may not be MAGA people or traditional Republicans, it's almost like this. It's almost like the reactionary thing against Trump the last election in reverse. They're seeing a bad thing that's going on. I don't like what's going on. These people all identify this thing, and even though they don't agree fully, they're jumping on that team. I'm going to jump on that team too. I think there will be a lot of people that follow that trend.
It'll be so fascinating to see what happens. I'm certainly one of them, but there's so much hate and fear as well. And so
Yeah. I think people forget oftentimes how close we came to like a full-blown civil war. I mean, we're millimeters away from the entire
with a bullet.
Yeah, with a bullet. I mean, that's that.
I think so too. Some of my followers poo-pooed that. Like, what are you talking about? The things would move on. Maybe.
Yeah. And so I'm hoping at least though, regardless of the outcome, that it's definitive. That what I don't want to see is like 2020 all over again, where it's this contentious thing and like,
Yeah.
that one side isn't going to concede, the other side isn't concede.
Well, I'm so curious. Like, what did you think of the 2020 election? How do you think about that? Talk about that.
I don't know what to think. It's like nobody has any real evidence of anything. I mean, they've done these investigations, and there's voting irregularities. So what does a voting irregularity mean? Like we all know, like people that aren't insanely naive know that there's cheating in every election.
Hmm.
People that are dead being, there's no, IDs required in a lot of places. Like there's shenanigans all over the place. Of course, this is the most powerful position in the entire free world, right? Like this is huge consequences. There's just literally trillions of dollars at stake of which way it goes. And to think that somebody's not going to cheat,
Not pulling a Bill Belichick.
I say the fucking Patriots cheated to,
Right.
like
It's funny.
and then there's a saying. It's like if you're not cheating, you're not trying. Like and so like
Right.
of course, like it's going to be some
Right.
cheating. I don't know how much cheating was
Right.
like, and I don't think anyone who makes a strong claim about it has a first clue. We're all just hearing the same reports filtered through the media, and oftentimes it's biased through whichever lens you tend to view things through. So I don't know, and ultimately I don't care because I'm against elections. I'm against democracy.
Mm.
I'm like against the
Mm.
whole thing. So
Damn.
for me, I just don't care necessarily. Other than like I don't want to see the whole country I live in torn apart. Like I don't want to see people killing each other.
Right.
Like that's my primary concern. Because I sort of view elections as, it's like they're mostly inconsequential because both sides have been bought out by the same people. So the
So
same,
it's a little bit of
like pro wrestling.
um,
Are you for the heels or
no.
the
What do
good
you? What do
guys?
you? Right. So you're a bit of a God. What's the word? It starts with a C.
I've been called the C word before. I'm not sure if it's the same
No.
one you're thinking of.
No. Oh God. Well, you don't have much hope.
Oh, a cynic.
Thank you. Thank you.
No. I'm absolutely not. I'm white pilled as hell. Like I'm a huge white pill dude.
How do you explain that?
Well, it's simple. It's like I have hope for the future. I'm not cynical. I don't think that. 'Cause I'm also, smart enough to realize that things are getting better, like on average over time. Like no matter what, like Steven Pinker has done some great work on this. Like you look at any metric, and it's very interesting that the perception of that metric is negative. So human beings, you say like, how do you think, human longevity has been over the last 20 years? And oh, it's getting worse, but it's actually getting better. You talk about crime rates, same
Hmm.
thing. Is crime going up or down? As always people say it's going up, it's going up, it's going up, and it's actually precipitously going down. And so our perceptions,
Hmm.
because humans through evolution are negatively biased, right? So we're more attuned to the things that could kill us rather than things that might give us some marginal, increase in benefit. So we're so focused on the negative, and we're hyper, and honestly, we're getting fear porn 24/7. It's like, our eyeballs are bleeding from our screens because we're seeing every horrible thing that's happened in the world.
Right.
But things are getting better, and so I'm not like cynical about it, but I definitely, at the very least, am skeptical of democracy. I don't think it's a ethical system, and it's not something that I think is from a utilitarian perspective serves a ton of function other than to keep people in the immediate term from like ripping each other's throats out. But I just don't think it's a good system. Like I always tell people, it's like technically gang rape is democracy in action.
Right.
It
Right.
doesn't mean it's ethical. It's like it's not good. But
Right.
also, I'm smart enough to know that it's an evolved mechanism, right? So through human evolution, we started in tribes, and society has sort of evolved, and there are government institutions have evolved with it. But everything that we evolve with doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. For example, slavery. We had chattel slavery for all of human history till the 1800s.
Right. Right.
I don't think anyone today is going to look back and say, we were better with slavery. We should probably go back to doing that, right? So I look at it that way. I think this is something that incrementally over time will evolve, and hopefully people like me can make the ethical case that, what, this isn't the great way to do it, and the free market is better, and make the argument, and hopefully people adopt it. But so I'm definitely
So
not.
it's the idea. So for the people who may not even reach, to people like my dad, the boomers on the left, um, they say that democracy is bringing the power to the people and making sure the people have a voice in the
Yeah.
process. And you say what to that?
I think that's complete horseshit. That's naive. That's naive horseshit. It's a slogan. That's sloganeering, and that's intended by it's that message is crafted by the people that actually have the power to convince you that you have a power and you participate in the process. And that's why I think elections are show. It's essentially the ballot box is like the suggestion box of slaves. Put your suggestion in. We'll take something under advisement. But how many times, Brian, have you been asked, what your position is on a particular bill by your representative? 0 fucking times. Because you know why? Your representative doesn't even write the bill. I'm not sure. I think we talked about this when I was on your show. It's like the representatives don't even write the legislation. You have K Street over in Washington D.C. If people don't know, the K Street is just a line of firms, legal firms that represent big moneyed corporate interests, and they show up and write the legislation, and then basically, and these are the they curry favor and donors, right, and they work out these backdoor deals, and the politicians then decide if they're going to vote for this legislation. It's insane. You get these giant stacks. These bills are like thousands of pages long. They don't even read. It's been written by the lobbyists, but as soon as there's a vote on the House floor and the Senate and they pass the thing, then it's law, and people act like they have a voice in this process. They just don't. You're not on K Street. You're not a billionaire. You don't have anyone representing your interests. And if they ever pretend to represent your interests, it's performative. Like, my view is it's a performative way to make you to basically placate people, so people just feel like they're doing something. And voting does feel like you're doing something, like, oh, you get the sticker, right? It's like a fucking child with a gold star on your homework. Right. You stick it on your thing. I voted, put it on social media. Look how good I am. I participated. It's not really their fault. We get this indoctrination from the time we're in, kindergarten, right? And you go through the public.
I'm Exhibit A. Look how important this is. Oh my God, I'm losing sleep over it. I did this, and this. Finally voted for Republican. It's such a big deal.
Yeah, and it means 0 in my view. Like, I'm sorry to denigrate anyone's, votes or belief that their vote counts. But this is just my perspective. I could be completely full of shit. I've been wrong a million times in my life, so everyone take it with a grain of salt. That's.
Well, no, it's about corruption, right? Everyone agrees that there's corruption, and so the question is, how do you get it out?
You can't.
My friend.
Do you ever read Lord of the Rings?
No.
Okay, do you know what the metaphor Tolkien used in Lord of the Rings was? Like, what it was for, the Ring of Power?
Let me think. I think I know this. The Ring of Power, the metaphor. Oh, shoot, you made... No, I'm not going to be able to pull it off. I couldn't remember the word cynical. So.
And so, by the way, this is not opinion. This is not like me just trying to impose this on the text. Tolkien talked about this himself. The Ring of Power is literally a metaphor for government. And that's why a human being or an elf or whatever could never carry the ring. It had to be a hobbit. A human could not wield that power, right? It's 100% corrupting. And if you watch The Lord of the Rings, like, no matter how good you are, even if you're Galadriel, the best elf in the world, like, she got tempted for a minute. She had to take the ring off. Like you can't do this. And the thing you can't have is the ability to murder another human being, based on your whim. Right, and that's really what government is. It is like Elon has this right. It is a corporation with a monopoly on legal murder. That's all it is. And as soon as you have that, you will be infinitely corrupted by it. There's no way to wield it without being corrupt. That's my view, and I think Tolkien absolutely had it right.
And so, you would say then, not to do a stick figure counter argument, but play devil's advocate. What then? Everyone for themselves, and people can take care of themselves? That takes care of itself through private association.
Yeah, right. And that's where I think that the straw man argument that people like to erect and then immediately tear down is not valid. Like, I think if anyone is looking at this, you need to understand that the anarchist position, which says, like, no, government shouldn't have a monopoly on this, doesn't mean no one should do it. Right, just because, like, we don't want the government to be our police force because it's a monopoly and you can't fire them, you can't take your business elsewhere, doesn't mean we don't want policing. It's like, no, I want policing. I just want to have a bunch of firms that are competing to provide the lowest cost, highest quality services to protect my property and my person and ensure public safety. Like, I want
Give us the services, not the power.
Yeah, yeah, and I want to be able to, if like the George Floyd thing happens, they're choking out black people in the street, and I'd be like, you know what, police force A, you can go fuck yourself. I'm canceling my service. I'm going with somebody else. And the greedy capitalist who owns, service B, they're gonna make windfall profits. So there's an incentive for them to act in a way that's in accordance with the values of the consumer. With the government, like you just can't fire them. Like no matter what they
Right.
do, you cannot choose otherwise, right? And that's my big problem with the so-called democracy in government is like there's no choice for the citizen. Like there's no power to the people.
Right.
What power do you have, Brian? If you dissent,
Mm.
you're going to be thrown in jail, and if you try to defend yourself, once the police come, you're going to get shot. So what power exactly do you have?
Yeah. Well, no, the logic is compelling, strong if you take it seriously and talk to a lot of people like I have and understand, a little bit about underneath the the bullet points of it. It's a serious concept, and I obviously wasn't ready to go there. Maybe I would have voted for Chase Oliver if I was.
Yeah, I won't vote for anybody. Like like
Right.
Chase is a
You're not a libertarian. You're a full blown anarchist.
Yeah. Well, I take umbrage with the libertarians who, say there's a difference. I don't think, because for people that aren't aware, I don't want to get too wonky, but libertarianism, the essence of it is that human beings are endowed with their creator with self ownership. Right, you own yourself, and nobody else has a higher claim on your life than you do, even if they have a badge.
Therefore, taxation is theft.
Taxation is theft, and there's nobody has the right to, like, I don't have the right, Brian, to let's say you and I are in the same neighborhood, and we have a mutual neighbor who's lost his job. He's got some disease that it wasn't his fault, and he's having a hard time feeding his family. I don't have the right to go to your house, knock on your door, point a gun in your face, and say, "Brian, empty your fridge. I'm going to give it to Bill over there." Like that. That's a violation, right? And so, that's something that's core. It's called the non-aggression principle. And libertarians, that's kind of core. It's an ethical belief that's supposed to be core to their sort
So
of.
it's you own yourself. Non-aggression principle applies. Therefore, taxation is wrong.
It's extortion technically. It's not theft, but it's extortion. It's basically, I'm going to take your money. If you don't like that, I'm going to send armed men to your house to come try to lock you in a cage. And if you try to defend yourself from that assault, we're going to shoot you. Like that's what it is in a nutshell. And nobody wants to think of it in those terms, but functionally, that's what it means.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I'm totally going down my rabbit hole. I've been trying to interview you, and here I am telling you my thoughts.
No, it's all good. No, it's very good. So hit me.
Yeah. So the question I would have about Trump, because this is fascinating to me, is like, do you have any concerns being in the legal profession, or going to into the legal profession? His a couple days ago, Madison Square Garden saying he wants to eradicate the First Amendment completely.
So tell me what he said first, because I must have missed that part.
He said that he wants to
the flag burning?
He wants to have a year in prison for anybody who burns the American flag, which, if you know anything about the First Amendment, that is protected speech, not only clearly articulated in the Constitution, but also there's tons of case law around this. Like flag burning is been affirmed by the Supreme Court. This is protected speech under the First Amendment. So he's essentially calling for the repeal of the First Amendment.
Yeah, he's done that before. I heard him a few weeks ago use that line, and he said when he was calling into whatever Fox show he was, said, and people who say that it's unconstitutional are stupid people. And so he clearly thinks that he's got a superior argument to what is currently case law. And my reaction to that is I don't fear him. I don't fear that situation. If he wants to have a provocative, controversial view, which is probably, well, let's be honest, he probably does feel that way, and he probably will try to put it. But I just don't have this fear, to put it simply.
I don't either. I don't think it would ever go anywhere. No, Congress isn't going to pass.
It's his right. It's his right. It's his right to present that argument.
It is. And this is where I guess I get really sideways of Trump supporters sometimes, is because I take that stuff seriously as a cognitive defect, not like he's not like a Biden cognitive defect, but the way he thinks about things, that really worries me. That authoritarian streak in him is, and I can't square that with the Republican right, who are supposed to be limited government conservatives, and they're anti-authoritarian. Like, and it really was shocking to me the contrast when I saw Elon, who's like the free speech platform guy, right, who talks
Right.
tons, and he introduces Trump at
Right.
Madison Square Garden. Then he follows up with, "Hey, we're going to cancel the First Amendment." Like that was to me was a cognitive
Yeah.
dissonance that was absolutely staggering.
Well, it speaks to the coalition and the realignment. But that's a good point.
And he does the same
I
thing
wonder
on
what Elon.
other amendments too,
What,
like Second Amendment. Like this is another thing with conservatives that it's like I can't get why. I get why people like you maybe have drifted his way, but the conservative
right.
support I don't understand because like the Second Amendment typically with conservatives is sacrosanct. You can't
Yeah.
talk about this. And when the whole when he was president, it was the whole meeting. I don't know if you saw that clip where he was like, "No, I want to take the guns first and due process second." And he actually did take executive action banning guns. And he was trying to get assault weapons banned. Like he was asking Congress to start presenting that again. And so being very anti Second Amendment, at least in his mindset, you would think that that would disqualify him. Like prima facie from conservative
Yeah.
support, but I don't. He's got some magic that I don't know how he dodges the. It's like the Matrix. He
Right.
just,
Well, I think it's the combination of who his opponents are as well. He's able to do that dance. But yeah, it's interesting. While rights are extremely important to me, and as I've said lately, it occurs to me that my first couple of years of law school, learning the core curriculum, really nudged me to the right because oh, these rights are so important. Obviously, I knew that, but it really cemented that. And then studying critical race theory really shoved me further to the right, at least relative to where I was. But yeah, I can embrace him because although I feel the rights are very important, I don't come from a place of every regulation is an infringement.
Mhm.
When Uvalde happened, I think I was in law school at the time, and I said something like, "Reason, not every regulation is an infringement," something along those lines. And so so it doesn't irk me too much. I think on balance, he's the more conservative option. That's why I'm leaning in this environment. So it works for him. He's able to do that weave. Yeah, it's very interesting though.
Yeah, it is. It's not even the fact that he gets people to vote for him. It's I guess the cultish like rabid support. You know what I'm talking about. Like obviously there's TDS on one side that is completely
Yeah,
mental,
it's
but
the
there's
social.
it's like the Q side, the fringe on the
Yeah,
other side that I see. It's like man,
there's a lot of factors. It's quite interesting. It's kind of sad because it's so much of it seems unnecessary, but the bias against him, the radical social issues on the left, Trump's strength, and his ability as a campaigner, it's a volatile cocktail, and I hope we get through it.
at least we can agree on that, man. I'm very nervous for the next couple of weeks, and
Yeah,
I will be very
yeah,
happy when this election's in the rear view, man.
yeah, absolutely. Me too.
So let's talk about critical race theory, man. So that sort of seemed to propel you in this direction, and I'm very I don't want to say educated in the subject. I kind of am, but from a lay perspective, I've read all the stuff. I was actually in London last month or 2 months ago, and I met with Helen Pluckrose. If you're familiar with her at all, she's massive CRT. She's like the final boss against CRT. Like she and James Lindsay
Oh, again.
wrote a book called Cynical Theories, which was a complete. By the way, let me back up just a little bit. Those two, along with Peter Boghossian, did the grievance studies affair, where they publish these fake papers to academic journals in the social sciences, in the critical social justice world, and got them published and won scholarship for outstanding, or awards for outstanding scholarship. So they know this inside and out, and so like I have a foundation of this, and so I understand most of the at least the basic to intermediate level stuff here. And so I wanted to understand like how that hit you in school, what you know about critical race theory, and how it propelled you in your current trajectory.
Yeah. So tell me if you think I have it right. What I gathered in the two courses I took, the 2-sentence version summary is critical race theory is the belief that contemporary American culture is not objective, it's subjective, it's slanted towards certain people, that it's a dynamic that creates white hegemony, they call it, a white power system, even though it's colorblind. So that's why they call it objective. It's anti-objectivism. Even though on law it's colorblind, in the street, in reality, in effect, you have something that is very much slanted to white people. And the other thing I say when explaining it is, And so so the idea being that American culture is not neutral, it's slanted for whites. That means it's white. There's a white culture. So what is white culture? Well, it's a minimal government, a desire for minimal government and private property. And so do you think I have it right when I say critical race theory is the belief that society based around private property, minimal government is a white society, and it's really just not fair to have non-white people forced to live in that environment?
I think you got the major elements right. Critical race theory, as I understand it emerged from postmodernism, right? So you have these players, these thought leaders, Foucault, Derrida, that come from a postmodernist belief that you're correct. Like they're like everything is essentially subjective. They're skeptical of grand narratives, and they say that you can't have any direct knowledge of reality, essentially, because it's all mediated through the
Right.
senses, and so it's all these gradations of subjectivity. And there's something called dominant discourses. They're very concerned with discourses, and like you said, like this is just the standard narrative that you hear, the dominant narrative. So, for example, they view the scientific method as just a different way of knowing. Right. So even though it has predictive power, and we can,
It's not objective truth. It's not the right way. It's the white way, perhaps.
right, and they will focus on that, right? Like what group is the dominant group here? What discourses are being disseminated,
Right.
and how? And you're
100%.
correct. All that stuff sort of just magically permeates into culture, which is true. There's some elements of it that are absolutely true. Like we do have, things that are engineered, historically to benefit whites and to provide.
Yeah, the culture didn't come from Africa. White people brought the culture that we are modeled on. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, but they have these other claims that are embedded in critical race theory, which are, you probably heard them, is like it's impossible to be white and not be racist, right? So they sort of deploy this
Yeah.
Kafka trap, which is it's very similar to the
Yeah.
Christian idea of original sin. Like you're just born with it, and just the fact that you're
Right.
white means that you've got this original sin called whiteness, and you're
Right.
a white supremacist, and you are a racist by the very nature of your being, only because of the color of your skin.
Well, it's implied. It's implied. If you react to being told that society is systemically racist, and your reaction is to ignore that, then you're part of the problem. And so the one thing I didn't say with the CRT is it's not just a diagnosis; it's a prescription.
You got to do
We're
something,
gonna-
don't you?
so deconstruction and reconstruction. So it's anti-objectivity. What does that mean? It means we've got a white culture in their view, and what is white culture? Minimal government, private property, and so therefore we got to do something about it. And doing something about it is extreme, it's radical, it's intended to be, and it's undoing that culture. So I agree. It's funny. Nick Fuentes, who I see his posts occasionally, say what you will about the guy, and a lot could be said about him, but he is pretty sharp. I mean, he's a sharp guy.
Racists can be sharp.
100%. Yeah, no, 100%. Despicable, really despicable. It's so people are complicated. But he posted something about the melting pot and merit, and how those two terms are basically vehicles for us to be ruled by foreigners. And my reaction to seeing that was like, critical race theory says that our system is white, even though it's colorblind. And I would agree with that. Maybe the two concepts aren't that related, but it just made me think we do have a white society. I think that's right. Where I differ from the critical race theorists is I think everyone can thrive in this society. So it makes me want to ask the anarchist, because isn't the anarchist the ultimate believer in minimal government, non-existent government, and private property, right? That's what it's all about. So is that a white system? And secondly, can everyone thrive in that system? I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, I don't think it's a white system at all. Right? First of all, it's not a system, right? So anarchists, they're coming from they're making an ethical claim, right? They're making a claim that everyone owns themselves. And I don't think that is, racially imbued with any sort of concept, like, because we're all human. It might even be the most anti-racist thing you can say, right? Which is that, like, no, literally,
Right.
Every race, every color, every gender is identical in that we are all human beings and we all own ourselves, and nobody else has a greater claim on your life than you do. If you're a black person, a white person doesn't have a higher claim on your life than you do. It's a very equalizing force. Essentially, it levels the playing field. Unless you have the
Right.
racist belief that the certain races are inferior and they can't take care of themselves and they need a government or they need something else because they can't hang on their own, which I think is abhorrent. I think that is a
or
terrible
or
thing to
or
say.
they want something else, and so to be a little softer to the CRT, giving them the benefit of the doubt, it's like, hey, we shouldn't have to live in this. We don't. This is not our culture. But that's where it gets to the melting pot thing. It's like, okay, I don't see anything preventing you from having your culture in this country as it stands right now and embracing the general American principles that still apply today.
Yeah, hold on, but this is important. This is really, really important. I'm not sure if you know this, but in postmodernism, because they say there's no such thing as objective truth, their claim is that really it's nothing but society is nothing but power games played between groups,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why intersectionality is so important to them. They have to define exactly which group you're a member of
Sure.
to understand what your relative power is to another person. It's all about power dynamics, which should
100% agree with
which
you.
should terrify everybody, right? Because when you start talking about
Right.
power, you're talking about violence, essentially. Like you're talking about what can you force another person to do, and so I think that's a very terrifying aspect of CRT that people don't really think of. They do a lot of mind games. They do a lot, like you
Right.
mentioned, like, hey, the work is never done. It's not enough to be not racist. You have to be anti-racist. You have to do the work. Like there's all these slogans that are actually telling you what their game plan is. And the whole thing that they believe that like there's no such thing as truth and it's nothing but power games. It just means there's nothing they won't do. That means there's no moral component to this. It's just like, nope,
Mm-hmm.
whatever gets my group a better outcome,
Right.
I'll do anything. It's just complete. I think it's evil. I think it's deeply, deeply evil.
Well, it's probably the most unsettling thing, and the reason that what triggered my political identity crisis while studying it was like, what you tell me there's no truth? No, I want there to be truth.
Mm.
Don't tell me that. You cannot tell me that there is no such thing as objective truth. Um, and how it's really the ultimate critical race theory, the ultimate manifestation of identity politics. I just didn't like that. Being in that, you asked what was my, how was it being in the classroom? Um, the material was controversial enough, but what really actually set me off, triggered me, was the comments and attitudes from my fellow classmates. I was 10 years
Oh,
their
I bet.
senior, and the funny thing is there was like one black guy, and he was the prosecutor in training. He was the one guy like me who was kind of saying, no, I think this system is pretty good, and he was going to go work for it. So yeah, it was what you can imagine. Very, very scary, very angry, very resentful,
How'd they
and it
treat
just
that
didn't.
guy? How do the other students treat that guy?
Fine.
Oh,
I mean,
interesting.
I mean, yeah, yeah.
Usually, the reason I say that is usually what you'll see is the most racist diatribes being thrown at anybody who happens to be a part of a minority group who might not fall in line with the CRT thing. Like they eviscerate those people in a ghastly way.
I will say that the professor, who was so incredible and brilliant and fair, given what he was teaching, I really liked him. But nonetheless, he was espousing a political point of view, and he did ever so politely argue that the people who take the minority view, that's what they call it, the minority view
Mm-hmm.
within the black group, for example. Um, because again, there's white culture, there's a black culture, there's an Indian culture, there's a gay culture, and within those cultures, there are minority groups, there are majority dominant viewpoints, and so yes, it's all about the dominate the power dynamics, and it was just all very unsettling. And no, he didn't get it too bad, this gentleman, but um, there wasn't a whole lot of respect for the people, the minority groups, like the Clarence Thomases, the Ben Carsons. Um, not a lot of respect for those guys in that room.
Yeah, and that's really sad to see because I feel like the legacy of Martin Luther King, which was what I was raised on. I remember growing up and watching MLK, and it was like hell yeah, like it's not the color of your skin, it's the content of your character, it's what you provide, like it's your how
Right.
good of a person you are, like that's how you really want to be judged. And it's totally flipped to where his legacy now, like today, Martin Luther King Jr. would be an apostate in the CRT culture.
Mm,
Like he would be saying things that are absolutely anathema to their viewpoint.
yeah. It's so that was my reaction. But again, I operate on the surface level, and I think my professor, for example, I think would disagree. In fact, I asked him. Unfortunately, I didn't actually stick around and get the full answer, but in passing, he said no. Martin Luther King would not be on the Ted Cruz team, even though it seems like on the surface level he might be. So that's a really interesting question. But the way I operate, I have to admit that that's the conclusion I come to as well. Very controversial.
Well, that's why we like talking about stuff. We wouldn't have podcasts. We wouldn't have controversial topics to delve into. So talk about the most controversial topic. It looks like you voted. I think I saw you post on X that you had, and I think your girlfriend voted differently than you. So how are you managing the conflict in your own household, being divided?
There really isn't one, fortunately. I'm so lucky. We've been together coming up on a year now. It's really been amazing. And there's a lot of respect, and it's very healthy. There was a speed bump. Her family is very anti-Trump. She's relatively anti-Trump, but honestly more so with her family. But we got over it, and like a lot of people in my life, but I will say her family is probably the biggest issue. People started to go, wait, is this you, Brian? Is this like, are you sure you want to do this? And so, look, man, it's controversial, but these are crazy times. I did it. And ultimately, her family appreciates me and respects me and understands that, because last time I saw them, I was a Kennedy guy. And I said, no, there's no way I can vote for Trump. But they thought I was a little loony for going Kennedy. But so much happened in that 6 months. And I arrived at the decision I arrived at. And I felt a pretty strong sense of conviction. And a lingering question is, well, am I guilty of audience capture now? Am I just grifting, this and that? Look, I'm not going to dismiss the question totally, but the bottom line is I didn't reach the conclusion driven by money. And so, is it wrong for me to shout it from the rooftops nonstop now that I'm making a couple bucks from it? Okay, separate conversation. But yeah, they like how I treat their daughter. So I think we're going to be okay.
Hey, that's good, man. Because one of the things I do hate being an anarchist, watching people who are in the political tribe game, is the shitty way that they end up treating each other oftentimes just because of how they vote or how they view things. And for me, one of the great joys in life is talking to people who have a different viewpoint and being like, hey, that's interesting. You're different than me. Tell me more. Right? Like, why do you see it that way? And I think so few people do that now. And I see so many people getting caught up in this division thing. And I see like there's this whole trope about, fighting at Thanksgiving dinner over politics and stuff. It's like, that's such a shame, man. It's like, why would you ruin such a great family, gathering with over some politician that doesn't give a shit about you in the first place? That's just, to me, it's a tragic thing to see.
Well, her thing was, as long as we continue to share the same values, there's no reason to have any questions about the relationship. And I don't think I've changed, really. I don't think, and so I said, I don't think there's a problem.
Yeah, maybe you got to keep her, man. That sounds good.
Yeah, I think I do. Oh, no, really, I can tell you. Sure do.
Awesome. Well, hey, dude, we're up against the time mark, man. Like, really appreciate you pulling up, dude. Like, it's always such a pleasure talking to you, and best of luck with everything. And I want to come back and talk to you sometime after the election and see how things have shaken out and see if some of the things that either of us have said came to pass, or we end up with egg in our face, man. That'd be a fun retrospective.
It's a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for having me on, and look forward to our next chat.
Yes, sir. Talk to you later.